here we are. The final episode of Season 1. And the one where we're about to pick the winner. Can Ju-On the Grudge, a haunted house simulator, beat out the PS2 version of Alone in the Dark? Yes, by the way, that whole thing is the title of the game. Ju-On the Grudge, a haunted house simulator. We may have gotten The Grudge in 2004, but the franchise started out 4 years prior. The franchise has been going strong ever since. We even had Ju-On Origins released in 2020 in Japan, and a film prequel for the English-speaking world in 2019. The game was made to celebrate the film's 10-year anniversary, and it was a Wii exclusive. It was just another game that flew in the face of the Wii being only for kids. The game was made by FeelPlus, which has a fairly interesting past and published in the US by Xseed. The neatest part of this game, in my opinion, is that it was directed by Takashi Shimizu, who was the director for Ju-On, the American version as well, and this actually has an awesome tie-in to this series we're doing. He even directed a live-action trailer for Nightcry. Alright, so if you haven't seen this series before, I took 8 games, Ju-On being the last in line, and I'm pitting them against each other to see which one I think is the worst in my collection. They are judged on game mechanics, presentation, story, and game feel. Before we start judging this game, I just want to point out that we've actually had a lot of decent games in this series, some of which I've come to really enjoy. Mainly, I know. The first thing I want to say is that controlling a flashlight with the Wii remote is the best idea for horror gaming. I know it works amazing for light gun shooters, but this really is a stellar idea for horror games. I may not like it, but Silent Hill Shattered Memories used this idea, and I think that in the first person aspect it works even better. Sadly, this is where I have to stop the praise for this game. When turning side to side, it's very slow. I've seen other first-person shooters on the Wii do the same thing, but they did it faster, like Metroid Prime. Now, this isn't always a bad thing. Moving too fast, I think, would actually ruin the atmosphere, but moving this slow is more annoying than anything else. Now you would think that you would use the nunchuck to move and look around with the remote. But actually, no, you have to use the B button. It's a bit awkward at best. Now, I know some people hate when I talk about this, but nothing annoys me more than when Wii games have you flail around. And in this game, that's a necessary mechanic, and that's not just hyperbole. Like a lot of games that have come out recently, your flashlight can and will run out of batteries, but unlike something like Outlast, when that happens in this game, it's instant death. So make sure you keep an eye out for them. I know the graphics aren't the prettiest, but there are actually some great visuals and atmosphere here. They actually mapped out the house from the movie, and I personally think that's amazing because they could have just phoned this whole thing in. There are actually other areas the game has you play in, although most of these aren't nearly as inspired as the original house. Each one of those areas is done by a different member of a family, though the arms are shown the exact same no matter who you're playing in that family. Seriously, these other areas aren't nearly as inspired, so don't get your hopes up too high. Instead of any kind of build-up, there's a lot of jump scares in the game, which I think is a real disservice to the franchise. They aren't my favorite films by any stretch, but they at least had a little build-up before just launching into a scare.
Jump scare.
The sound design is kind of sad. I wish they'd put a little bit more effort into it because a good score can really add to the atmosphere, and it would have been something to put the game in a much better place overall. Okay, so saying this game has a story is a stretch. It has one, but it's a bit flimsy. Each chapter you play a different family member, and you have to make it to the end, only to die anyways. That's right, you die mid-chapter, that's a bad thing. But one thing we've learned about the curse from this franchise is your chances of survival are not good. Those odds will never be in your favor. The one exception to this is the first chapter, but don't worry, you play as that character again, so their death is inevitable. Each chapter has puzzles, and by puzzles you need to find a key to unlock a door. And it's always just keys. There's nothing more creatively done with this. I wanted this game to be better. But when I had heard that the game played and felt awful, I was hoping that was a stretch. Like when people say that Fester's Quest is one of the worst games ever.
God damn! This game better stop sucking ass or else I'm gonna have to give it the finger. Middle finger.
I know I can't take that seriously, but sweet Jeebus, this game is bad. Just trying to move around in this game feels awful. And when you're being forced into quick time events to avoid deaths, or forcing your perspective to make sure you see a scare coming long before it does, is something that I just can't get behind at all. I'm not sure what they were thinking with this game. In fact, this wasn't their first game that they worked on. Hell, they used to be tied together with Mistwalker and worked on my favorite Xbox 360 era RPG, Lost Odyssey. So they had experience going into this on good games. The last two standing for the title of Season 1 of the Worst of the Worst are Alone in the Dark and Ju-On. And something I can say about both of these is that they swung for the fences, but unfortunately they were both strikeouts. For me, it boils down to this. Both games were bad mechanically. The story for both weren't good, from what I was able to play of Alone in the Dark. The presentation for both had some highs and lows. So it comes down to game feel. And frankly, I could at least finish Ju-On, though I wasn't really happy about it. Now, when I said I finished it, I mean I did the 4 available levels and couldn't be bothered to unlock the last one because I didn't like it at all. But I could play all of it. So that means that Alone in the Dark for the PS2 is the winner of Season 1. Or I guess that would make this the loser overall. Because thus far, it is the worst game I own out of the 8 that I picked. I own enough games that it is guaranteed we are going to have a Season 2. I've already picked out the next 8 games I'm going to play for that season. We'll see how this one goes. Until then, I'm Adam the Horror Historian, and Alone in the Dark sucks.